Yes, hello from the great northern wilderness. I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. My name is Leah Prime, and this is the Invisible Night School. Super excited to see people joining us week over week. Hello to the Earth, and of course, resident INS favorite, Steve Long. Really great to see you here week after week. Michael Huntington, nice to see you, friend. Let me see. It's really exciting over and over every week to see people coming in. Duncan, hello. Red Panda Koala, nice to see you, dude. So tonight, super excited to welcome Jeff Knox. Jeff Knox, known as Mr. Jeff Knox on Twitter, one of my personal favorite researchers in the community right now. His kind of claim to fame is presenting pretty complete documentation and research every single day on a case pertinent to the date. If anyone isn't following him, definitely recommend giving him a follow. His thoroughness and documentation that he presents every day, every single day, is truly very impressive. So we're going to be having him on the show this evening, and due to just some scheduling snafus, we've pushed Sarah Scholes out a couple weeks, so she'll be joining us in early February. I'd like to welcome, of course, my co-hosts onto the stream. So I will bring on the inimitable Campbell, the brilliant Luis, our resident dubious layman, Nick. Good to see you, friend. And then, of course, I'll bring on Jeff. Hey guys, how are you? Happy Wednesday.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, very well. Yeah, happy Wednesday to you too, Leah. How are you doing?
It's just another day in paradise in like the Leo world. As I'm sure some of you are noticing, I'm in a little bit of disarray because I now have a standing desk instead of working at a dining room table like I have been for the last few months, and as a result have kind of refactored my workspace, which means my lighting's all fucked up, my banner's all fucked up, but I'm here and I'm excited to talk about UFOs with some of the community's best and brightest minds. Nick, how are you?
Oh, I'm a little under the weather, but COVID free, so that's good.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just allergies or something, but otherwise good. I'm doing good.
Good. And Mr. Caetano.
Yes.
All right.
So mysterious always.
Yes. So where do we want to start here? I mean, when I came to Jeff about coming on the show, having been familiar with his research, I was just like, look, man, whatever you want to do with the time is cool. Like, if you just want to talk about your research methods, that's great. If you want to talk about particular cases you're a fan of, that would also keep us all very happy. I think, at least for me, infrequent that I come across someone with such an encyclopedic knowledge and background in the subject. So we'll have him on. But then this is also going to be an open lines show. So we'll be sharing the StreamYard link for people to jump on and join the conversation. If there's either questions you have for us, things you want to contribute, it can either be directly related or pertinent to what Jeff will be discussing, or if there's just stuff you want to air out to the community or talk to INS about, we want to hear it. Just want to, curate the conversation a little bit before we get started.
Do you guys just want me to maybe kind of introduce how I got into UFOs and UFO research to begin with?
I'd love to hear that. Let's do the how we met story. Take it away.
Okay. Well, I got into UFOs very young. I literally, as a child in elementary school, I started reading through just tons of UFO books, watching UFO documentaries, and I was pretty heavily into it throughout the early internet years, computer bulletin board years, old FidoNet UFO conversation years. I let it lax for a little while during school and whatnot, but about 15 years ago, I got really heavily into it again. I was always studying the topic, but about 15 years, I just started doing a very deep dive, reading hundreds, if not 1,000 UFO books, collecting as much material as I can. And about 10 years ago, I was fortunate enough to have the resources to be able to do this kind of full time. And so I started doing my UFO research full time, traveling around the country, going to conferences, archives, libraries. I started getting into preservation and scanning and digitizing about 7 years ago. And that's kind of where I was focusing mostly the last few years. And I got on Twitter this summer because I wanted to help share historical cases to kind of help point out to people that UFOs didn't just start existing in 2017 or 2004, or all these new cases that people only seem to want to talk about. I wanted to kind of present some of the historical evidence and cases that go back throughout history. So I started doing these daily history posts, and that's kind of where I am now. And then I met up with you guys, obviously through UFO Twitter, and some not so good initial reactions from some of you. Like Leah,
you can just say it, Jeff. You can tell the story.
I got blocked from Leah basically this summer via misunderstanding. I get myself blocked by a lot of people.
I had Jeff blocked for about 3.5 months before I realized that he actually is as earnest and kind and genuine as he is. I think Twitter's poisoned my brain to assume that everyone who asks me a question has some like stupid, cynical irony underpinning it. But actually, Jeff is just as nice as he seems.
He wasn't just dunking
so
on you?
He's not blocked anymore. No, he wasn't dunking on me. I can appreciate a good dunk. I don't block people that dunk on me. That's why you're not blocked, Nick.
I'm still blocked by a lot of people on Twitter. People don't really like skeptical viewpoints, and I have some strong skeptical viewpoints on cases, but that gets me blocked by a lot of people. But, that's fine. If anybody enjoys my research, that's a good thing. So,
now people should be talking more to each other, Jeff. And what do you think of the people coming in these days who are new to the field? You mentioned that briefly. Do you think it's a good thing that people are taking a look at this subject, or do you think that there's cause for concern there?
I think there's cause for concern for where these people are getting their information from. A lot of the people coming in this field are getting it from some of these mainstream sources like, Linda Moulton Howe, Jeremy Corbell, Ross Coulthart, places that really just aren't that critical and are known for presenting a lot of bunk out there to the audience. I think it's great that people want to be interested in the topic. I just think there's a lot of UFO misinformation, disinformation out there, and just bad information. And unfortunately, too many of the new people in this topic are being exposed to nothing but bad information or just uncredible information, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of good researchers out there. And I think that's one of the saddest things about ufology is that a lot of the best researchers are utterly unknown to the vast majority of people interested in this topic. They know the people they see on TV, on Ancient Aliens, on these other like schlocky TV documentaries. They don't know the people that have been doing the hard work for the last 70 years. And I think that's sad. But
yeah, that's...
Oh, go ahead, Leah.
I was going to say that's something like we've talked about before, how much of ufology really does exist outside Twitter. Like UFO Twitter is definitely its own particular microcosm.
It's its own community. It's its own like niche. I don't even consider UFO Twitter part of ufology, to be honest. Just like I don't consider the Greer side to be part of ufology or some of these other sides. They're kind of like these fringe offshoots of like people that try to take this topic seriously.
Before we get too deep in this, now you said a hot button word, a trigger word for a lot of people, which is skeptic, right? Okay. You use this term skeptic, and I bring this up because I love to hear your thoughts on how you define and relate to that term or that word. Like, what does skeptic actually mean to you when we're talking about ufology?
I think a skeptic would look at the information openly, but short of any actual evidence, I mean, you kind of have to take it all with a grain of salt. I mean, like I consider Mick West a true skeptic, and everybody hates Mick West. I mean, a lot of UFO Twitter hates Mick West. I think he's one of the best people involved in this field, and I wish we had 1,000 more of him. And I've said that many times because he looks at what we have without accepting unknowns and things that we can't prove and tries to come up with reasonable, prosaic explanations for cases. And I think that's what people need to do. And I think it's sad that people dismiss people as skeptics or debunkers just because they don't happen to like a case they like or because they provide a prosaic explanation for a case. You know, almost all cases are going to have prosaic explanations. That's just a fact. So I don't know why people are so negative or, dismissive of people that have a skeptical viewpoint. I pointed out before that most of the people I know that have been researching this topic for 50 plus years, a lot of old UFOs people, the people I'm involved with in this history group, I'd say they have more in common with Mick West or other skeptics than they do with the vast majority of ufology. And that's not to say they don't think there's anything to the topic, quite the opposite. They've devoted their lives to studying it. I've devoted my life to studying the topic. But it's because I care about the topic, I think it's important to dismiss a lot of the less credible stuff and try and stick to what we can actually show or demonstrate, which unfortunately isn't much.
Now, you've had a long history. You said since you were a child being interested in UFOs. Did you start off with that skepticism, or is that something you picked up along the way, like while researching?
I mean, I was not always as skeptical as I am now. When I was younger, like when I was younger, I still really hoped there was some truth to Bob Lazar, but that was just more a wish and a dream. I've been pretty skeptical for a large amount of time. I say by the time I at least got into middle school, I was starting to be more skeptical about the topic. And nowadays I kind of approach it not even from is this case factual or true? I'm just more concerned with preserving the historical record. And I like to look at the topic from other aspects like mythology, folklore, the sociological and religious aspects, the psychology of belief systems. There's a lot of ways to study this topic that doesn't actually come down to whether or not something's like a ET or non-human intelligence. I think this topic is fascinating and it can be studied countless ways that don't come down to a belief system. And that's kind of where I am now with things.
Yeah, you make a good case to present the value in studying old cases, because I think a lot of people, especially the people more newer to the topic, don't see the value in looking into old cases necessarily. But I mean,
whereas I liked old cases. I kind of feel the opposite way about new cases. Like these days, there's so many people posting random videos, photos that could be damn near anything. I kind of feel, at least with the old cases, if they were documented in all these publications, at least somebody kind of looked at them and did some research. Like with a lot of these new cases, like, there's just so many of them, you don't know what to do with them. But I'm just I like the olden days. That's just me. I wish I was born 20, 30 years earlier. Then I could have been around back then.
What's the most fascinating aspect to you of ufology? Like, is it the psychosocial stuff, or is it learning about how video, like what Mick West does?
For a while, I was more into the scientific approach and looking at things like using instruments to try to detect UFOs and doing more of the analysis that Mick West does. I kind of moved beyond that because after so many times you find out that there really just isn't much in these cases. For example, the Nimitz case, I had high hope for that. I attended the SCU conference, the first one, read all the reports, talked to the people that were involved in generating the reports. And I thought, hey, maybe we have some real hardcore science we can do on this. Again, disappointed. I've been just disappointed so many times throughout my time in ufology that I've kind of given up on the idea that, there's the hard evidence. I'll be glad if it pops up at some point in time, but I've given up hoping on that showing up and try to just study the topic just from, that, like I said, the psychosocial, why people get involved with the topic, why they believe what they do. And I'm also just a big history nut. So I think it's important to preserve the history for future generations and future researchers to be able to access it and go through it. And I think that's why it's important to get a lot of it online and digitized, because not everybody has the resources to travel around to archives and libraries and museums like I and other researchers have over the years. I think we need to get all that data saved. And if there's something in there that we can find, that's great. If not, it's still fascinating, like I said, for so many different reasons.
Now we have. Sorry, go on, Leah.
I was just going to ask if there are any specific researchers, Jeff, that you admire or think are doing the great work in the subject.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have some favorites. In fact, that's I mentioned to people before, I kind of got involved with this history group via Mike Swords and Robert Powell. And it's kind of some of my heroes in ufology. You got people like Barry Greenwood, Jan Aldrich. They've been working on things like the UFO scanning project, and they've been working on this topic for longer than I've been alive. I mean, they're like top-notch features in my book. Mike Swords, of course, I love that guy. He's a top-notch researcher. I like Mark Rodiger with CUFOs. He has done a lot of work on the more technical scientific side of cases, like his vehicle interference report that you guys referenced in the last show. I like Vincent the Ballester Olmos. He's fantastic. I think he's one of the best ufologists in the world, to be honest, and he has been since the 70s.
I'm sorry, what's his name?
Okay, it's Ballester Olmos, Vincent some Ballester Olmos.
Vincent Juan.
Maybe
Vincent Juan.
Yeah, Vincent Juan Ballester Olmos. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Luis. He's the individual that reached out to reference something from our website fairly recently, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He does both the PhotoCap project, and he did that catalog for CUFOs I tweeted yesterday or the day before of Spain and Portugal cases. He's written some really good papers on the evidentiary aspects of ufology. He did one with Thomas Ballard. That was two views of evidence, of UFO evidence, and Ballard presented one view and he presented another. He's just done a lot of really good work that is at the academic level, at the science level, when it comes to ufology. Yeah, that's right. Red Pentecost. That's right. Besides with that, I mean, I also like people like Fran Ridge with Nightcap. Donald Johnson, I've used a lot of his work in my daily post. He had written one of those vehicle interference papers for the original CUFOS conference in 1976, I believe. He's been around a long time. There's a lot of these old guys that have been in the field forever, and they're kind of they're the people I look up to in this field. And of course, we all know Isaac. I think the work he's done with digital preservation is absolutely phenomenal. Like that guy's just amazing. I love that guy. But yeah, those are just some of the people I like. A lot of the more modern people, not so much. Even a lot of the more famous people like Richard Dolan, not so much, to be honest. But
do you know what happened to Alan Hendry?
Alan Hendry? What do you mean? What happened to him?
Well, like he sort of dropped out at some point, and he never returned to ufology. But I don't know if anyone ever spoke to him again about that.
You know, I'm not sure. If people don't know, Alan Hendry was with CUFOS. He was kind of like their lead investigator. If you look at old International UFO Report magazines or journals or whatever you want to call them, that would have different cases in them, he was the kind of guy that would head up the investigation or at least delegate it. If you look at old CUFOS like sighting report forms, like his name would be on the top of it. And he wrote a really good book on my shelf over there on UFO investigations. It's kind of one of the best books out there for if you're going to investigate a UFO sighting. But as to what ended up happening to him, I'm not sure, to be honest.
And we talk a fair bit on this show about observation versus interpretation in the sciences. And I'm curious for you, Jeff, what kind of observational evidence first drew your attention to the subject, and why did that kind of evidence reduce in value to you over time in proportion to your shift to a more skeptical outlook?
Well, so when I was really studying this topic, reading a lot of books, and you would see, all these claims, things like radar data, radar visual cases, trace evidence cases. And it seemed to me initially like, hey, there might be some real good, hard scientific evidence here that we can actually dig into and maybe prove something with. But the more, again, you dig into that data, like I was talking to somebody about alleged UFO debris, like TTSA samples and whatnot. When you actually look at the analysis of that data, it's not really that unusual. A lot of the samples are totally prosaic objects. Like the Bob White object is this stalagmite from a metal grinding wheel. I used to have one that looked identical. to that. The Arts Parts Project is piece is just it's
Nice.
industrial waste, from the Betterton Kroll process, and a piece of a radiator sheet. So it's like the more you actually dig into what's supposed to be the physical evidence, the hard evidence people talk about, the more you realize it just doesn't really stand up to scrutiny. It's just not that good of evidence. And then you look at things like videos, and some of them look interesting. And, I spent a lot of time, I mentioned, traveling around the country. I mean, tens of thousands of, I drove probably maybe 5,000 miles a month, like 12 months a year for like 6 years. And a lot of that would be at night, right? And so I'd see a lot of crazy things in the sky that even a skeptical person like me would kind of trip me up. But what I would do is I would stop driving and try and track down what I was seeing. And through various things like low light, like my Sony camera is really good at taking low light pictures, stuff that looks like it's floating around the sky sometimes is actually on a hill that you can't see, in the distance, and it's not actually in the sky at all. And after years of just literally chasing down, like once I was driving through this like rural area, and I thought this thing was following me through a field. Like I thought it was following right along with me, right? Standard kind of parallax kind of situation. I drove around that rural area for 3 hours trying to track down that light, only to find out it was like this rural branch light that was glitching, and it would like one would turn on, the other would turn off, and like they would just like look like they were bouncing around and then following me around. But it was just glitchy like rural branch lights, In fact,
That's
if you go to Area 51, I spent a lot of time at Area 51. They've got these ranch lights there that look identical to what Bob Lazar explains, where it looks like it's a stepping motion. And it's jumping in the sky like that. It's these really glitchy like ranch lights they have near the mountain that's like on the BLM side of the land before you get to the base. And that still trips me up every time I drive by it. I'm like, whoa, what is that? I'm like, oh no, wait, that's those ranch lights again. And it's just the more I looked into all these different types of evidence people present, the more I just was unimpressed. And kind of started to doubt we'd ever start to see real good evidence.
Well, that kind of brings us into your research method, right? Do you want to go through that with us? I know you have slides. I think we can get those to work.
Sure. Yeah.
I'll play Vanna White here. Let me get the slides up.
Okay.
All right.
So I'll just kind of explain what I kind of go through, at least on a daily basis. This is some of the stuff I use every single day when I'm working on my history post. First, I kind of got to come up with the various cases. When I first started getting going, it was a lot more drawn out process. I literally spent hours going through the NICAP Chronos listings to find dates that match today. I would also use things like Donald Johnson had this on extraterrestrials on this day or something site that doesn't exist anymore, but that I used to way back to try to find cases. But more recently, I started using, I use more than just this, but George Eberhardt's UFO and Intelligence Timeline. That's kind of slide 4 if you want to move it over to there. Kind of skip it.
To slide 4?
Yeah. Because it's a phenomenal like resource that George has put together. George is another kind of hero of mine. He's kind of like I kind of wish, again, I could have been him. He's like a bibliographer and a librarian, and that's kind of what I feel like I am a lot of the time.
This is the kind of stuff that makes my heart beat a little faster, to see a big 2-volume bibliography on this. Super cool.
That's not the only one either. I believe in the Discord, we dumped just a whole bunch of resources like that last week of different bibliographies of UFO publications and material. But George has gone through literally hundreds of books and resources, pulling the dates of cases out, and created this massive, it's some like 900 pages or something long listing of cases by year and date that even has links to various resources. And that's kind of where I'll start off with the references provides. And then I'll go dig through some of my other places. If you wanted to kind of go back to just slide 1, I regularly use the UFO Encyclopedia for my cases, the UFO Evidence, both that's volume 2, and volume 1, the original one that came out. That's the UFOs and Government is the book that is produced by the history group that meets up with Mike Swords that I got involved with a few years ago. That was their first publication, and I use that on a fairly regular basis, probably almost every day. They've got a new one that's finished that I've been proofreading. I don't know when that's going to come out, but you guys all gotta love that. You want to go slide 2? Again, that's the first volume of UFO evidence. I use that again on an almost daily basis. Condon's report comes up quite a bit, and so I use that regularly. Everyone bashes on Condon, but the thing you got to understand about the Condon report is it's just ignore the part Condon wrote, his summary. The rest of it is actually full of some pretty good case information and actual data. Like, you can't throw out the whole thing just because Condon was an idiot. And then I use a lot of NICAP special reports, like their Strange Effects from UFOs report. Their UFOs A New Look was kind of like a document, kind of like the UFO evidence book that they did beforehand. That is something I'm actually using on a case for tomorrow. I'm going to go to the next page. Then there's some just good encyclopedias that I also use on top of Jerome Clark's UFO encyclopedia. Ronald Story did one. Margaret Sachs did one. Those other documents, again, are cases that involve electromagnetic interference or vehicle interference cases. Come up a lot in my post. And some of the documents that include those is like a show pics, a study of secondary effects. And NICAP also did an early report on the electromagnetic effects associated with UFOs. Next one. Actually, you want to skip ahead to number 5 because we already did number 4. And another resource I use on a daily basis is basically the Center for UFO Studies website. It's a phenomenal resource. It's kind of an old primitive looking website. In fact, all these UFO groups kind of have these old.
Yeah, this looks very like 1998 GeoCities.
Yeah.
We need like a construction.gif video.
I'm not sure it's been updated all that often since then, but they've got a lot of great stuff on there. If you go like on the left side, they've got early UFO periodicals. You can find things like NICAP's UFO Investigator and a lot of other publications by early UFO groups. They've also got some of their International UFO Reporter articles on there. And you can find most of the books and monographs that CUFOS has put out over the years on their website as well. Like we mentioned, Vincent Juan Ballesteros' catalog of Spain and Portugal cases that I posted a picture of my physical copy of yesterday. You can find that PDF on here, and I posted a link to it. So I'll use the CUFOS website a lot if I'm looking for old bulletins or newsletters or journals that I need to pull references out of. And that's the same thing goes for the next slide there. The NICAP website, of course, they've got their chronology listing. Up there is just kind of the 1965 one, but the page before that, you can just select by year, and they list cases through the year. If it's a Blue Book case, a lot of times you can look at the Blue Book files there. And it's just a phenomenal resource that people should be using. NICAP also maintains most of Kehoe's books. You can go and look at there for free, both in PDF or in web formats. A lot of their reports that NICAP's put out, you can get off the website. And again, Fran Ridge has helped a lot with that website. I believe he runs it. And it's a great resource that I use and link to every single day, as people who watch my posts probably notice.
These websites are killing me. They remind me of like my early days on the internet on dial-up.
Oh, I know.
It's incredible.
NICAP's webpage is kind of particularly a disaster, but you can still find the stuff if you look. And
Jeff, could I ask quickly? I noticed you said that you got involved with Michael Sword's history project. How did you get involved with that? And what's Michael Swords like?
He's awesome. He's great. Some of these guys, I'm by far the youngest person in this group, and sometimes my humor doesn't always match with their humor, but or I misunderstand older people humor. I don't know what it is, but no, Mike is one of the most kindest, generous like people I think I've met in this field. I got involved. I'd mentioned I'd been interested in digitizing and preserving and archiving information, and I had stumbled across Mike Sward's blog, several years ago, and it was great. And he had mentioned something called the History Group, and I'd heard the History Group be mentioned in regards to this UFOs and Governments book. And I was like, what is this history group? And how do I get part of this history group? Right. And so I got in contact with him and talked to him for a bit. They kind of felt me out. I actually had to go through these telephone interviews with Robert Powell and Mike. And then just kind of got invited into the group. And it's just a group of veteran researchers that we have a mailing list. We communicate throughout the year. There's meetups at his house, once or twice a year, where we discuss the various work we're doing, the different scanning projects, the different historical work, the new book. It's like I say, you got people like Robert Powell, Jan Aldrich, Barry Greenwood, Phyllis Budinger, was there, Don Ledger, Don Schmidt. Richard Thiem, he's the guy that would give the UFO talks at the DEF CON hacker conference.
Oh, cool.
Awesome. Mark O'Connell, he wrote the biography on Jalen Hynek. Mark is amazing, nice guy. Richard Knoll, he's a Jungian expert. He wrote the book The Cult of Jung, and is an expert on shamanism. And he actually
wait, who's the Jungian shaman guy?
Richard Knoll. He's at DeSales University, Richard Knoll. He studied shamanistic tribes in like Korea and Siberia and other aspects of Asia. He's got a great YouTube channel where you can actually watch these rituals and ceremonies being done that he's filmed.
Wow.
But he's also an expert on basically the history of dementia praecoxia. Just kind of like I take it an early name for schizophrenia or something. He wrote some books and papers on that. But he's a really great guy. And there's just a lot of people that if you were involved with ufology back in the 60s and 70s, like you might recognize their names, but these days you might not. But these are the original I consider them the OGs of the field that I'm privileged and feel very privileged that I've gotten to know and be involved with. And it's also given me access to quite a bit of material that other people wouldn't have access to. That's helped a lot with the cases and the posts that I do. Sometimes if you notice on some of my posts, there'll be handwriting. That's Mike Sward's handwriting written on pages because that information came from one of his case files.
He has pretty distinct handwriting. He was one of the first people I reached out to when I was looking into the Lake Michigan case because I knew he'd covered it on his blog. And
he actually was the one that originally drew out a lot of the radar trackings and speed measurements and whatnot on the Michigan case.
Yep.
And his house is, in fact, if you want to just skip ahead to number 13 slide. Again, this is Mike's house.
The dream.
It's one of the best archives probably in the U.S. It's not only just stuff he's collected. He holds Ivan Sanderson's. Ivan Sanderson had an organization called SITU, S-I-T-U. He holds the archives from Ivan Sanderson there. He used to hold a lot of Kufos material there. Some of that may have been moved to David Marler's in the last year or two. I'm not 100% sure. But if you watch TV shows like UFO Witness with Ben Hansen, when they show him going to the Kufos archives, that's Mike's house. In fact, these photos, I couldn't find my photos quickly. These are screen caps from Ben Hansen visiting Mike Sward's house. But I've spent quite a bit of time on that table there, scanning thousands and thousands of pages of documents, with my scanner, because it's an amazing resource. It's absolutely phenomenal. And a lot of those files, those folders, have been scanned and digitized, and like I have a copy of them on a solid state drive, and we have a history group. We have a Google Drive that we use. If like you go to the next slide, I've got access to this great Google Drive that not only do I have a copy.
Dude, you're just showing all the goods tonight.
Yeah.
This is killing me. Yeah.
Yeah, that we've got people like Keith Basterfield, Robert Powell. I got a lot of this stuff on a solid state, but we've got this uploading directory. We upload the new material that we're working on so we can share it amongst the people in our group. And I get a lot of my material through our little private drive here that, again, I feel very honored to be able to have access to. But sometimes when I'm searching for a case, when I try to find more references, I'll just pop in a date or details in the search there and come up with stuff, and it just pops up. But this is it's amazing to have digital access to a lot of the stuff that Mike Swords has at his house. I've actually scanned a bunch of stuff of his personal files that weren't done when this stuff was originally scanned back, however many years ago, that I'm still trying to organize and put together. It's kind of hard going through other people's UFO files, if you ever looked at Stanton Friedman's office before he died, like some people's UFO files are kind of like a disaster zone, right? And so like a lot of stuff I scanned when I was there was just like loose sheets that weren't even in the folders with the cases. Like, this is like 2.5 years later. I'm still trying to figure out where to sort this stuff and like how to organize it into like case files. And I still don't quite, and it's something I talked to Isaac about yesterday, I still don't quite understand Mike's category system and how he names and does his files after all these years. But that being said, it's been a phenomenal resource to be able to use this drive of ours to pull files off of that a lot of people don't have access to. If I'm sharing something on Twitter, a document that people haven't seen, there's a good chance it came from there. And you can probably credit those guys more than you can credit me.
Well, Jeff, the amount of information that you have gone over and have access to generally is remarkable. And it's kind of interesting because, like, we all are interested in this subject. We think there's something neat happening. But it's a strange thing when the more information you get hands on, the less convinced you are of the underlying premise of the subject. Could you speak on what, if there was a moment where you sort of it sort of got to a point where you were like, okay, this is going to change my perspective on this, or was it a very gradual process?
I'm not sure there was really a moment. It's probably kind of like more gradual. You can look at the same material 10 years ago, look at it 5 years later, and look at it now and come away with completely different opinions on it. And maybe I thought differently back then, but I think I've always been pretty skeptical, but I still think there's something to this topic, and I still think it's worth studying. And I'm still completely open to the possibility that there's something anomalous going on, that it's even non-human intelligence or alien or ET or Atlantean crypto-terrestrial or whatever you want to call these various entities. I'm open to that. I'm just agnostic as to what the ultimate reality of what's going on is, if there even is, one, or if we even find it out ever. And I think it's probably more likely just a whole bunch of different things that, are getting bunched together in this field we call ufology.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
What do you find most inspiring? What inspires you most doing this work? Is it sort of the recording of what you think will be one day resolved, or do you think it will sort of perpetuate in this way forever because it's an elusive subject of focus? The thing that we're trying to observe is very elusive. What's the ultimate goal driving you?
because I'm a sucker for pain. I don't know.
Because nobody gets into this because they're happy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, I'm just when I get into something, I kind of really get into something, whatever it may be. Like I'd never do anything kind of halfway, and so when I got into ufology, I really got into ufology. I was studying it, collecting everything I could. I mean, even peripherally related. I mean, not only do I have a massive collection of old UFO related comics, documents, you know, magazines, journals, books. I have a massive UFO collectible collection that I've spent far more money than I'll ever admit to acquiring.
Do you have Mars Attacks action figures? You can tell us.
No, but I do have some of the original Topps baseball cards.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
Can you scan those and share those, please?
Sure. I've even got the Close Encounter baseball cards from back in the day.
Nice.
Like
Incredible.
I said, I've collected quite a bit of stuff over the years. But what keeps driving me, you know, like I said, I don't think there'll ever be one answer. Like I would like one day if we ever did find out that maybe there is extraterrestrial vegetation, like that would be amazing to me. Will we ever find that out? I don't know. I hope we do, but I think there will always be the mystery. I mean, by the very nature, what a UFO is like it's unidentified. Like once it becomes identified, it's no longer a UFO. And so, hey, there will always be things people are seeing in the sky, picking up on instruments, whatever, that aren't going to be able to be identified for whatever reason, whether it's in the low information zone, we just don't have enough data, whether it's like an illusion, you know, there'll always be
balloon-like entities.
Yeah, balloon-like entities, you know, whatever. There'll
Space
always
trash.
be cases and mysteries. I don't think you can ever say there'll be an answer to everything because, again, that kind of assumes there is a one thing for there to be an answer to.
Are there any cases that you keep coming back to or that particularly captivate you?
You know, I get asked a lot, like what I think are the best cases, and like I tell people, I don't think there is best cases. I mean, there's certainly interesting cases. There's cases that I find interesting that
Yeah,
I keep coming
that's
back
what I'm
to.
interested in. Yeah,
But
like I don't think about best proof, but I mean ones that you particularly find compelling or interesting.
well, there's interesting and there's compelling. Like I find the Bob Lazar case interesting. It's a bunch of BS, to be honest, but I find it very interesting and have wasted a large amount of my life studying it. I spent 2 years almost full time studying the Bob Lazar case, traveling around, pulling court records from the legal system, talking to his employees, visiting his business, talking to his old coworkers from like Los Alamos.
Wow.
I literally spent 2 years pretty much all year long investigating Lazar. And that was even after I knew he was just full of crap. You know, don't ask me why I did it, but I guess why I did it was because I think Bob Lazar is an example of a case that a lot of people get exposed to, and that's kind of what brings people into this topic. Like, I think when you have people like Corbell make a documentary about Lazar, that brought a lot of people into this topic and a lot of interest in the topic. And I think it's unfortunate that that's the case because they're being brought in with just garbage, like with junk. And I naively assumed that maybe I could put an end to the Lazar case, you know, that I could find the smoking gun that finally puts an end to the Lazar story. And that was just dumb because no amount of evidence is going to convince Bob Lazar believers that, you know, he's didn't work on alien spaceships at a fictional place called S4. But I had hoped that if we collected enough good data, we could kind of push people towards studying more credible or serious cases. That didn't turn out to be the case. As far as cases that I think are well documented, there's a lot of cases that have been well studied, like Tom Tullian covered the Minot Air Force Base case of 1968, and he has a phenomenal website on that. I believe it's Minot AFB52UFO.com.
The favorite of the show.
Yeah. And in that case, you know, it's got radar scope images, you know, dozens of testimony, just hundreds of pages of documentation. And those cases fascinate me the most because there's something you can really kind of dig into. Ultimately, I'm not sure what that was. I'm not sure we'll ever know what that is. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of approach the topic just from more abstractly and just the kind of the vast amounts of historical data out there. I used to dig into individual cases more often when I was, younger and getting into things. Like I spent a long time studying Roswell, etc., and a lot of the other more famous cases. But at this point, I don't think there's good cases. I think there's interesting cases, but not compelling cases.
Could you give us your take on the Nimitz encounters?
So yeah, Nimitz was, again, I mentioned, I thought it was something that I had a lot of high hopes for because, here we had military, we had a military video, we had credible witnesses, whatever that means. And that's kind of one of the reasons why like Robert invited me to the first SU conference in 2019 and read through their entire report. I talked to a lot of the people that they used in creating that report, including a guy up in Canada who was an AFLR expert that they kind of used to consult when they made the report. And just the more I looked at it, the more I saw that, like many cases, it ultimately comes down to witness testimony. There isn't any actual hard data for it. We have a video that could be countless different things. And all the fancy math and the maneuverabilities and capabilities people talk about, the speeds, the G-forces, ultimately come down to what somebody says they remember seeing on a screen almost 20 years ago. It looks good initially, but it ultimately doesn't have any more data backing it up than countless other cases. In fact, there's historical cases, I think, that have more data backing it up, where we actually have radar scope images, at least, like the Minot Air Force Base case. We don't even have that with Nimitz. I think Nimitz and many of those cases are at a point where, because they're old now, they may be newer than some of the ancient historical cases, I don't think we'll ever get real answers to. But there's a lot of people that spend every day, all day, digging into just the Nimitz or the gimbal case, and they've been doing that for the last 5 years, hoping to find new data that helps support their case. And I don't see that happening personally.
Now, you touched on it a second ago, but what's your take on kind of that concept or that narrative pushed about trained or expert observers in a case?
I don't. Okay, so there, you can certainly be a better observer than other people, but we're all human and we're all subject to the same kind of making the same kind of mistakes, whether it's like perceptual errors, visual illusions, even so people are constantly putting up military pilots as like the top-notch best witness you can get, right? Military pilots are still, just like any pilot, is still subject to countless, spatiotemporal illusions that can occur when they're flying. In fact, fighter pilots, more so than normal pilots, are subjected to this kind of stuff where you can't train it away. And multiple studies have shown that you can't train away some of this stuff. So it's not that these guys are liars or being dishonest or even if they're confabulating. I believe they saw what they think they saw. I just don't think you can take that as evidence because people make mistakes no matter how well trained you are.
Sure.
Even Hynek himself pointed out military witnesses and pilots are some of the worst witnesses. He mentions that in one of his books.
Yeah, the new UAP report that came out, I think it was kind of a dud, but my major takeaway from it was that there was about 170 cases that are examples of servicemen and pilots misidentifying things, right? We had numbers of 163 balloons, right? If these are your expert witnesses, how are we have 173 UFO reports of balloons or balloon-like entities, like Campbell said?
Yeah, and obviously I disagree with what some people interpret the report, even on our own other Discord that we talk about. I kind of interpret the new UFO report as saying when they had enough data, they were able to come to conclusions like balloons, drones, airborne clutter. And the cases that they couldn't figure out is what they just didn't have enough data, that were kind of in that low information zone. And I kind of agree with Mick West on that. And a lot of people don't agree with that. But I think if they had that quality data, then they would have been able to determine something. But a lot of people are just holding out hope that the fact that they couldn't explain half of them or whatever means that there's some real good stuff in there. I don't think that's necessarily the case. It'd be nice if there was, but
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment.
yeah.
Now, in some of the old cases that we do have that are declassified, we know that Blue Book did come to conclusions on some cases that today we probably wouldn't have conclusions being determined, like set in stone on. So, for example, Minot, the Blue Book report established that the luminous object that was like hovering, taking off, pursuing the thing was on the radar, interfering with electronics. They attribute it to a form of ball lightning in the Air Force report. Nowadays we sort of don't see that ever. And ball lightning doesn't even exist in the newest report as an option outside of a more abstract natural phenomena kind of thing. Do you think that there's any value in trying to put a label on things if it's a possibility, or do you think it's best to leave it in an empty, low information zone? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it should be at least labeled as likely if that's a possibility. I think when you leave things in this unclassified or undefined zone like they do, it just leaves people open to speculate that it's something anomalous, when I don't think that's necessarily what they're saying. I think if a case has a likely explanation, it's not going to be a very good data point, and it's time to move on. And that's kind of why I've never been really interested in like lights in the sky cases or other things that don't really add data to the story. I think if something can be possibly explained to something, then that's probably good enough, to be honest. Like leaving it open, and because technically you can never 100% define what something's going to be. These are transient phenomena that we can't go back and look at really. Like we have to work with limited data to come to a conclusion, and even then it's just a maybe. Even if you look at the new UFO report, they say undefined doesn't mean unidentified, and these definitions aren't 100%, there's a possibility it could change. And
they have things like uncharacterized, unidentified objects. It's like,
how many? Like, uncharacterized does not mean unidentified. Like it's the problem is all this ambiguity in the language that they're using just leaves it open for the conspiracy theorists to speculate about whatever they want it to mean. And that's unfortunate. I think they could be a little bit more direct and the way they define things. It is interesting how so many of them are balloons or balloon-like entities. I've heard the theories that that's just the catch-all that they put everything good in. They call it a balloon, and that's the good stuff there. But no, I don't think so. I think if that thing in the sky looks like a cloud, it's probably a cloud, not a UFO with a cloud cloaking device. If it has a potential prosaic explanation, if it's just a light in the sky and it's not doing anything truly crazy, it's probably just something prosaic. Can we say 100% what that light was, whether it was a drone or a balloon or a Chinese lantern or a UFO? No. But if it could be something prosaic, I say toss it in the bin, move on to the next case. But that's just me. And I think that's what a lot of old researchers I think Hynek had that same kind of opinion. Like if it has a prosaic explanation, or it could at least likely probably be that, it's time to move on.
What do you think are some of the pitfalls that people make when they're applying statistical analyses to UFOs?
Well, that's okay. I'll use an example. You guys familiar with Amy Mikhail? I don't know if that's how you pronounce the guy's name. He came up with the orthogonal theory. The Straight Line Mystery was his book, where he basically thought that you could map UFO sightings on a straight line, like by day, if you had like a map of the world, you could find like sightings along a straight line on that like same time period. And the problem is, like, for example, in his case, he cherry picked the data to just cases that would fit on the lines that he was looking for and just dismissed everything else. And then you have the issue, how good is that data that you're using in your statistical analysis? Some may be good and supported by either great witness testimony or additional data, Others could be less good. You know, if you're doing statistical analysis on garbage data, you're going to get garbage stats outside.
Yep.
So
Garbage in, garbage out.
Yep.
So Jeff, we've mostly dedicated the conversation to these historic cases and like what I would characterize as like nuts and bolts style cases, right? Like sightings and physical things.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts, or what's your perspective on, I guess, the convergence of this subject towards consciousness and towards some of the bigger metaphysical questions? What are your thoughts there?
I don't know. I'm not to be honest, I kind of dismiss a lot of that stuff as more kind of new agey, like a lot of these quantum ideas of consciousness and people bringing all this consciousness stuff into UFOs. I think that's just all new age speculation without any sort of evidence.
You can be honest. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you're not into the woo.
Yeah, I'm most definitely not a woo person. I'm very materialist, but I think that people use consciousness to kind of, again, bring a lot of woo into this field. We don't even know what consciousness is, like,
yes,
as opposed to, you know, other areas like neuroscience and the brain and all this other stuff. Like I think it's a little too early to start bringing into the topic of ufology, but
mm-hmm.
Have you collaborated much with Erica Lukes, who's also got an extensive archival collection?
I haven't. In fact, I don't think I've even talked to Erica personally. I've always been a fan. I used to see her at various like MUFON and other conferences back in the day. And actually it was Jan Aldrich that really started telling me a lot more about her. And, you know, because he had started kind of, you know, him and Barry had kind of started mentioning her with her historical research and stuff like that. And so when I got involved in the history group a few years back, they kind of brought her up to me and started talking about her and all the great work that she was doing, and started following her back then. But I don't think I've actually, outside of, you know, online, ever talked to her or collaborated with her. So I'd like to. I'd love to visit her archives that she's got down there in Utah. She's got some great looking stuff that I'd love to see. And my mom lives in the Salt Lake area, so next time I go visit my mom, I'd love to visit you, Erica.
Well, what about the Skinwalker saga? Do you see that as like what are like some historical precedents for that type of story? Because it sort of goes a little bit beyond just UFOs. There's also kind of a creature feature aspect to it.
You know,
werewolves and stuff.
I will just mention, so I've actually spent a lot of time at Skinwalker Ranch. I've camped out there for about 3 weeks on the corner on what they call the UFO watch spot to the locals. It's basically kind of at the corner fence of the property. Like, you can't obviously go on the land, but I've spent about 3 weeks worth of nights camping out there, using much of the same equipment they do on the show, busting out all my software-defined radios, FLIR imaging, you know, night vision cameras. And I've never seen anything. You know, my dog has gone crazy when we're out there, and people mention these big black dogs. I'll tell you right now, they've got a neighbor that's got these like big black dogs that just run wild over the whole neighborhood. And I wouldn't be surprised that's what some of these people are seeing. And I've watched videos of people that have gone out at Skinwalker Ranch and filmed their kind of own YouTube little shows about it. And I've seen the same things that they're pointing to. And they're pointing to like the neighbor's ranch light and saying it's a UFO. Like, so having actually spent quite a bit of time out there, I have yet to see anything anomalous. That doesn't mean it isn't happening. The thing is, the problem with hotspots, or the very idea of hotspots, is, again, it's an issue of like selective data. People are just selecting cases to kind of create hotspots. Like, honestly, there's sightings everywhere all the time, like everywhere. Like, you can make a hotspot out of anywhere, to be honest. Like, I'm not sure there is anything more going on in Uinta Valley, Uinta Basin there than is happening anywhere else in the world or any other rural area. But, and I'm not a fan of the Skinwalker show. That's actually why I first got on Twitter this summer, was because I was being critical of the Skinwalker show. But I actually ended up contacting quite a few people. I spoke to Seth Shostak about his appearance on the show this summer, asked because people were going around saying, oh, SETI is going to now be investigating the 1.6 gigahertz signal. Like, that cannot possibly be true. So I got in touch with him. He's like, no, that's a human signal. We have no interest in that whatsoever. It's like, we told them that. I'm like, yeah, that's what I thought. I contacted the metallurgist from the University of Utah about the metal sample they dug out of the ground to see if there was anything truly anomalous about it. Unfortunately, he refused to speak. They said they made him sign an NDA, and he wasn't allowed to talk about anything he did with the show, which, again, I think that's problematic. When you're making your supposed scientists sign NDAs where they can't even talk about their data, while at the same time you're creating a TV show making all sorts of crazy claims about that data. But Skinwalker is interesting. There's a lot of places that are interesting and a lot of stories people tell that are interesting that they're hard to kind of come to a conclusion to. It's either that they are crazy, they're lying, or something very strange happened to them. Like when you get into things like humanoid cases and things like abductions, which have always been in my gray area, some of that stuff, it's like, what's really going on? Either there's something anomalous going on that I don't really think is the case, or there's something psychological going on with those people. But when it's a light in the sky, you can see how somebody can misidentify that. How do you misidentify someone that claims they were standing next to a 3-foot tall alien being and it was talking to them or feeding them pancakes or whatever? Like, what do you do with those kind of cases? I'm not sure, to be honest. Mm-hmm. The original UFO Joe and his pancakes, the Joe Somington.
I'd love to just take a moment here when we're sort of contemplating good versus bad evidence. There's some comments here. I'd love to, like Sangbeam is saying, so is this a panel of skeptics? And I would just say, in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. A skeptic, right? Like, we should all be skeptics. And that's sort of what we're trying to emphasize here, is that it's good to be skeptical. Somebody who's skeptical of the government is, and then thinks there's stuff going on, takes a look, they're a conspiracy theorist until they find a conspiracy, and then they're a historian. So, skepticism is, if it's good or bad, depends on what you're applying it towards. So I think that we should be encouraging people to adopt the label skeptic more, because it enables us, if we think that this subject has some value, to actually get at what that value is.
Yeah, and I mean, we say this all the time on this show too, that this is definitely not a monolith, though you will note that the tenor of the show and the discussion changes based on what we're discussing and who the guests are and what the particular methodological approaches are. If you're looking for some deep woo, I did episode number 13 and talked about conferences and meditation and psychedelics, and I am happy to bust out some crystals in a future episode, but right now, the focus is on a skeptical, research-driven approach to the subject. Let us all be intellectually spacious enough to entertain, discuss, and engage with ideas that we may not personally believe in or agree with, right?
Absolutely.
That's what we're here to do.
And just to underline that very quickly, I would love to draw attention to our great fan, our friend of the show, KMF. And he's saying, in quotes, if it could be explained as X and we know X exists, just assume it is X is nonsensical. That means literally nothing new can be discovered in any topic. Now, I would just say to change just assume it is X to it probably is X. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that it's impossible for it to be something else. It's just a pure statistics. And that's the exact thing that happened with many newly discovered natural phenomena, rogue waves, ball lightning, what else? The meteors, all of these things. Yes, exactly. Long list of eyewitness reports that weren't verified. And it wasn't reasonable to assume it was something new until we had the evidence. So I think that we're all open to new information here.
Yeah, exactly. And see, a lot of people, they think skeptic is a negative thing. They think skeptics don't have any interest in the topic. They think it's all bunk, it's garbage, and they're just trying to be negative or contrarian and trying to dismiss it all away. I think that's not true at all. In fact, I think it's because not only do I care about in my case, do I care about this topic, but because I want to believe there's something anomalous out there, that I feel it's very important to be extra critical and extra skeptical about what I do believe, to kind of outweigh that bias that I inherently have. I think you
Right.
got to be skeptical, even if you do hope to find something, because otherwise you're just going to start leading yourself down a path of belief. And that's just the wrong approach to take. There's nothing wrong with being a skeptic. Like, I think all serious researchers should be a skeptic. I think it's an absolute must.
So, gentlemen, how do we feel about opening up the lines, getting some viewer participation? Jeff, are you ready?
Sure.
All right, trial by fire, my friends. Yeah, so we're going to open up the StreamYard. I'll post the link in the YouTube chat. Folks can jump on and join us. Just so you know, I always try to remind people this is not a democracy. It is a benevolent dictatorship. So if you're a jerk, I'm going to kick you off the stream. We're here to have respectful, thoughtful conversations with each other. But that said, StreamYard is now posted in the YouTube chat. Feel free to jump in. I'll see you backstage and then get you added to the stream. It's also totally cool if you just want to join voice only and not on video.
Yep.
And we're aiming for 100% good faith discussion. If somebody's heard something that they don't agree with that I or anybody else has said, please do bring it to us and correct me if I've said something wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll get a wholehearted thank you from me. So if that is something that you're looking for, jump right in.
Absolutely. We don't have to agree, but we can get along. That's fine.
Oh, hey, we have one of our favorite people back stream. I have Sparky behind the scenes.
Awesome.
Sparky!
Hello.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
We
Perfect.
can. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you so much. I felt moved to just pop in and say hi to you guys and also just say what a neat group this has grown to become. Like I met Leah a while ago, through another server, and I'm so proud of you all. This is such a wonderful conversation. I feel like it is so balanced. It is respectful to so many different approaches to the topic. This topic can be really, really tiresome. I told you, a few of you guys, that I've, went through a stage where I had to step back and take a break because it was really just, it was not only pushing my own sense of who I am in the universe, but it was really trialsome on my mind to just see the discord, not discord, but the discord in the community about things and the, seeming unwillingness of people to try to get along. But what we have here in this group is so special because we realize that there are experiences of different kinds, and we realize that it is not just one explanation with what's going on here. It's a whole host of different things. And I'm so proud to call you guys my friends. I just wanted to tell you that.
Yeah, Sparky, thank you. And in many respects, this is kind of your fault because I met all of this cast of characters because of you when I was living my lonesome dreams over the summer.
Oh, man, that's
and you
right.
connected me with everyone and kind of took off from there. We're just delighted to hear from you and have you here with us.
Yeah, we miss you.
That's wonderful. Yeah,
I do miss you.
I know that I still owe a little bit of a paper and a discussion about optical mirages from the pilot's
Homework is due, lady.
Homework has been due. It is overdue, man. So, oh my gosh, yeah, I better get on top of that. But I finished my pilot's license. I got a new job, a fully remote job that I start week after next. That's going to allow me a lot more mental space to just sink into things again instead of be constantly spun up. So it's like a working sabbatical in a way.
That's awesome.
Wonderful.
Remote work's the life.
Yeah,
yes.
Remote work rules. I haven't worn jeans since March 2020.
Hell yeah. Oh, that's the way to go. Yeah.
No more hard pants.
Yeah. And my new boss is super cool. He's, I told him like, hey, I plan on like microdosing. Do you have an issue with that? He's like, no, I really don't care what you do. As long as you get your job done, do whatever you want. I'm like, okay, winning. Like, awesome.
That is a good boss.
Yeah.
A little more time to explore my own consciousness as well, which I think is going to be really valuable. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Anytime you want to jump on, anytime you want to join a show, we'd love to have you. And of course,
yes,
always love to back channel with you too.
Oh yeah.
Whenever
definitely.
You're available.
Absolutely, definitely. I think I had a question for Jeff, and if he has already explored this and would rather that I just listen to the VOD, then I will do that. But Jeff, I want to know, like, is there any, oh, I think this was asked and I think I missed the answer to it. What has been the most interesting case to you and the most mysterious case to you, whether or not you think it is truly mysterious, or, you know, you researched it and it was so weird and then the explanation was super weird, even though it was still prosaic? I'm curious about that.
I mean, yeah, like I say, it's a hard question. I get asked that all the time, and
I bet.
it's very hard for me to come up with any case that I think is really, that I found really interesting or compelling. I tend to I still find the Roswell case interesting after all these years for many different reasons. Not the least of which is that people are still digging into it after 70 something years.
Yeah.
But I personally don't believe anything anomalous really happened there. Like I say, there's a lot of ways to look at this stuff that doesn't involve the cases truly being anomalous or really having any sort of compelling evidence. As far as things I find interesting, I do find the humanoid cases interesting. And like I say, the really oddball, the high strangeness stuff that it's just, what do you do with? Like they're just very interesting. Some of them are just super crazy stories, but I'm not sure to really go beyond that with them.
Right.
As far as I say, cases again that are heavily documented, I mentioned the Minot case. Somebody in the chat has been talking about Malmstrom. That's a case I've been very critical about in the past. Again, it's a case that's been looked at by a lot of great people over the years. And I've expressed my opinion that I think Robert Salas's Malmstrom case didn't exist. It never happened. He's confabulating based on bad memories of what actually happened at Echo Flight. And I think that's a case where you had something that really happened. Some silos were shut down, but there's no evidence that a UFO was involved in that. A lot of that was added, after the fact over the years.
Oh, wow.
And for example, the Salas side of the story, he didn't even remember it until he underwent hypnosis, and then he had to change his story at least 2 or 3 separate times to match with the known facts of the case to try and fit in what he believed happened with what we know actually happened there. We may not know 100% why those silos shut down. I mean, they have ideas and theories of what happened, but again, that's something that we're never going to have 100% answer for, because they didn't come to one back then. And that's allowed people to build these modern mythologies on top of these old cases. And you get people like Salas coming out with a story.
And I want to actually
really
add, I'd love to add to that very briefly about Malmstrom, because it was at the citizen hearings, I believe it was in 2013, that were the represented, not former congressional members were brought in and did a sort of fake UFO hearing thing. And they brought in a bunch of ex-military, including Salas and a captain from the Air Force, retired, Bruce Fenstermacher, who testified next to Salas about Malmstrom. And he talked about how Salas FOIA'd documents, and the documents that Salas FOIA'd demonstrated that there was what they call like an electromagnetic event. There was no reference to a UFO in the internal documents, and that there was some kind of electromagnetic feedback in the system. It fried the logic couplers, and then they brought in Boeing engineers to correct that, because it was an electrical issue, and apparently it was resolved. So that's based on FOIA documents, and we don't know if
And then it didn't happen again.
That hasn't happened since, and that was another thing that has been verified, that these types of things have not happened. And that was something that Fenstermacher actually cited, is that they wheeled the missiles out. He was there on the site, and they brought them over, fixed them, and then they proceeded to do that, nationally. And there haven't been shutdowns since. So there's some good evidence there that never gets cited when the subject's brought up. And I wish it would, because then we could just move on to something that's stronger.
Well, this is why people really need to read Tim Herbert's work on the Malmstrom case. He's a skeptic, but he was actually a SAC missile commander at Malmstrom, and he has done some of the best work on that case, both the Echo Flight and the myth of the Oscar Flight, on his blog. And like many of these cases, if you go back, there's the claim that somebody saw a UFO nearby, and that's why it became a UFO case. there's no evidence anybody saw a UFO nearby. There's so much conflicting testimony by the people that were there at the time that what are you supposed to do with that?
So I have a question on that. Sorry, and I apologize, Jeff. I think I just cut you off. But when you're done with your thought, I do have something. So my next question on this with Malmstrom and with a lot of these other UFO cases is, you know, Salas says that he saw something, and you know, if it was after a hypnosis or whatever, that is what it is. My curiosity with this whole topic is, you know, what motivates someone like Salas to be so passionate about what they saw to then put themselves out there in different press conferences and different efforts. That part really fascinates me. And it's not to say that it's a proof of anything existing or not existing, but it's the mental, you know, psychological power that these experiences have had on people. That is my fascination with the topic. And it's so interesting how that thread interties with all the other research that you guys do too. It's just so fascinating to me. That was just kind of my comment. It's just, it blows my mind.
Well, I think with Salas, I don't think he's lying per se. I think it's a case of confabulation. We know he was working on those missile command sites back at that time,
Right.
and in the area. I think what likely happened is that he remembered the Echo flight shut down, and later on, you know, this idea that he was somehow involved with it developed in his mind and his memory. And it's just confabulation. It's not true dishonesty. I think he believes he was part of something. And that's why he went through hypnosis to try and recover more details. Only they just didn't match any facts. And he just kind of had to construct his story from there. I truly think he believes he was part of something. I just don't think he was. I think that was just confabulation. False memory is more common than people like to admit. I mean, I've seen it happen in my own family. People come up with all sorts of crazy things they'll swear happened. I mean, I've got some of my own false memories that I know are false, but they're just still so vivid in my mind that, you know, I'd swear they happened, even though I know they didn't.
And I'll just add a couple details that Salas actually never claimed to see a UFO himself at the base. He says that he received a radio transmission from the security team saying that they saw a red glowing object. So that alone is quite significant as something that people don't emphasize. And when I first learned about it, you know, it makes me feel disappointed when somebody is saying how strong it is. And then like I look into it and the facts aren't lining up. Like it's just causing, like, to be on the side of the truth seeker for a second here. I just want to point out, like, I want to be convinced. I want the best evidence. And like, if I look into it and then it's not at all what I was told, it turns me off the subject more generally. So I just would suggest like being upfront with those details.
Well, and then you end up with, like, at the hearing in Congress last year, you got people asking about the Salas case, like congressmen asking about the Salas case. Like,
right.
That to me makes you really wonder what data they've actually seen if they're bringing up cases that just are based on stories from, you know, how many years ago. Like, obviously, they found that case compelling enough to ask questions about it, but there's not really anything to that case. So could that possibly be true with some of the other claims some of these politicians are making when they come out and say, here's data of multi-sensor data of all these phenomenal, like, appearances of objects moving, you know, with capabilities we can't explain. Well, is there really the data, or is it just, again, they've been told stories by former service members and they take that all to heart? I don't know.
It's a fascinating discussion about it. And yeah, so go ahead, Leah. I'm going to jump out and let someone else pop in, but thank you for having me, guys.
Of course, Sparky, such a pleasure. Yeah, we love you.
Thanks
See ya.
so much for stopping by.
I was gonna say my contribution to Sal's discourse is he used to follow me on Twitter, and he used to kind of mansplain to me things that I would post about math and science, and I used to kind of flirt back at him and be like, "Ooh, maybe you could tutor me." And then he unfollowed me and blocked me because I called him Daddy Nukes in one of my responses.
Oh my God.
So, just in case anyone wants to know how effectively I straddle both sides of the conversation, that's case in point. Okay, yeah, so we have Song behind the scenes. I'm going to bring you onto the stream. Hey, what's going on?
Hi. I just got interested in this UAP UFO topic as I guess it became more pronounced in like 2017, 2018. And I served in the U.S. Air Force at Maelstrom and a bunch of other bases and things when I was enlisted in Air Force. So one thing is that it's very hard to get the information because a lot of it is classified, and not because of UAPs or UFOs in general. And a lot of people in general public or skeptics or researchers won't understand this unless they've worked in government, worked in clearances, worked in the bureaucracy or whatnot, or the IC or whatever. They don't look for UAPs and UFOs in general. There's no reporting procedure. A lot of times there's so much work to do in personal life outside of the military or whatever. Nobody wants to deal with UAPs, whether it's the stigma or it's because of the amount of freaking stress and workload everyone's under. So when this stuff comes around, it may eat up 1 to 8 to 12 hours of your time, and then you're behind at 1 to 12 hours of work and everything else you have to do. So they overclassify it to sometimes just to make it go away. They don't report it, or somebody an admin and some CO decides to bury it. So then when the next CO comes in, he has no clue what it is because it's stuffed in an archive folder somewhere, blacked out and locked away. So when people say there's some sort of massive conspiracy, I've been in it, and there really isn't. This stuff is actually more common than people think, but the problem is we can't discuss it because it relates to our job and our classified areas, which everyone knows that kind of stuff exists, whether it's nukes, it's classified aircraft, materials operations, it could be even finance related, whatever. We can't talk about it because it relates directly or indirectly to it. Thus, the whole thing is already classified, and it's not even related to UFOs. So it's right that there is no massive crazy conspiracy of the government or military. Maybe very, very minor few might have some very small clue what goes on or privy to sightings and different things. And yeah, some of it is strange. Some of it's freaking weird. And we've seen some of it. But the problem is a lot of it's classified. Now, the issue is with Maelstrom. Without me explaining and giving too much of how the systems work there, because some of it is classified, for one, Robert Salas was a missileer. The thing is that there is no missile dudes at the silos. They're at missile alert facilities called MAS, which some of you are probably familiar with if you research this. And they're connected to multiple sites: Kilo, Yankee, Whisker, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. They're all over Maelstrom. They're in Kansas, Oklahoma, everywhere, Dakotas, Wyoming. Right now we have F.E. Warren, Minot, and Maelstrom. For the most part stateside. So, and then you have like Barksdale and some other things, but that's a whole nother topic that has to do with ravens and transporting the stuff and whatever. But the thing is that at Maelstrom, when that system was taken offline, what's very strange is that's the only time it really has ever happened where they've all been screwed up. Now, is there maintenance? Is there things that go on? Yeah, it happens. Is that stuff classified? Unfortunately, yeah, it is. No one really will be able to pull those reports. How that one report got out, I have no clue, because typically those are not supposed to get out. I don't know the whole history behind it. But the fact is that it's an offline system. It's intranet. It's closed. I think everyone kind of knows that it's all underground, how these things communicate. And if, let's say, there's nuclear war and the whole government's taken out, these missiles can launch by themselves with just the people in the missile alert facilities or the MAS, because if a nuke hits a MAF, right directly hits it, even with, like, let's say a hydrogen bomb or something. Those two missileers and not in the silo, but the MAF facility, they're still safe. They're still fine. They can live for, however long, how many supplies and fuel things they have down there. And the thing is, they have backup systems too. I can't talk about the methodology and the technology and procedures they have for that, but they have backup systems. They have backup generators. They have food and water. They have tons of stuff down there. Besides, it fucking smells and down in those silos, not in the silos, but in those command centers. So Salas was not there. So Salas was.
Do I understand correctly that you're pointing out that Salas could have just been mistaken because he wouldn't have been directly at the site?
Here's the thing. I can't talk about how he knows.
Yeah,
I can't discuss that. But I'll tell you that he doesn't need to be there to know. I can't explain why or how, the methodology, technology, whatever, but he doesn't need to physically be there to know what the heck is going on. Now, again, I can't discuss it. That's an NDA thing. I can't break that. But you don't need to know. Even back in when I was serving, they don't need to be there. We don't need to be there. There's tons of sensors all over there, but the thing is they're all classified. And the government has some pretty advanced stuff when it comes to these kind of sensors and this data on these missile sites. So that's one thing, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be there to get sensor data. And the data can be seismic, it can be sound, it can be all sorts of infrared, it can be all sorts of stuff they have there. And they have sensors there going back to the 50s, 60s, 70s when they started making these things. And they still have them, and they get more advanced as time goes on. So yeah, he doesn't necessarily need to be there. It doesn't have to be vision. It can be all sorts of things that they can pick up. And they can tell a difference if there's like somebody walking via a rabbit, via wind or whatever. They can pick up all that stuff. Now, for let's say the security forces or security police that were out there. So security police generally were the ones that were out near the bases. Security forces were the ones that were out in the missile fields. Now they combined it, and now it's security forces. I think that was around the 1990s. They combined the AFSC, or called Air Force Specialty Code. But there used to be two different career fields. So the security forces guys that went out there, I believe, I don't know if it was a fire team or if it was a sentry team that went out, if it was patrol, a maintenance. I know it was at night, so I imagine it was not a maintenance team because there's no Red Horse engineers that went out there. So I imagine it was a sentry that was going out doing checks, station at the site, whatever. So the thing is that this is completely an offline intranet system, and they have backup ways of basically how they can communicate if one ends up going down. They don't just have one line and it breaks and you can't. And the thing is that you can't just run and manage all the sites just from one silo. They have security apparatuses around that where they can't fuck with that. It's impossible. So the fact is that it's very strange that if a UFO was there and screwed with that one specific silo, you can't necessarily break all the others or break the missile alert facility that is not 100 yards or 300 yards or 1 or 2, 3 miles. You're talking about 50 to 100 miles sometimes away from some of the farthest silos from that facilities. And I don't know the exact distance with theirs because they've changed and they've been building more and different things over the years and closing them down. So I'm not exactly sure of like the geography on them, but you're talking about, if that is the case, shutting down and screwing with a math facility, command center, and a bunch of other silos networked to that, and you are anywhere from possibly 20 to maybe 100 miles away. And these silos could be anywhere from 10 to maybe 100 miles away from each other. So, and they all got shut down at the same time. And the thing is that the tech, when they installed it and all the stuff back in the 50s and 60s, that was about as cutting edge as you could possibly freaking get. The missiles have been breaking like crazy and had massive maintenance issues starting in like later on after they were at 20, 30, 40 year shelf life. So in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, they were trying to modernize the technology and advance it. Like you spent how many billions of dollars recently to try to upgrade it because it was too old. Back in the 50s and 60s, it was absolute cutting edge. So it was completely bizarre that this whole system completely broke and failed all of a sudden. And that stuff was literally brand new. Well, so that's the even weirder part about it.
Let's dig into that.
Just none of it makes sense at all. It just isn't. This is not supposed to happen.
Well, I was pointing out. Okay, so I would grant Robert Salas something happened. The nukes got shut down, and he got the radio call from the security team saying
if he was crazy, he would have lost his clearance. They don't mess around with PRP and clearance, TSSCI. They don't.
Story for like
he would have lost his clearance.
But let's just look at the pure observations. Like, okay, so let's say all of the observations were correct, and I'll grant him that fully. When we move into interpretation, it was a UFO. That's quite a claim, and I'm not opposed to that possibility. But because of documents that Salas himself FOIA'd about the subject, in addition to the son of the commander he was reporting to at the time, who was very fixated on this case because of the allegations around his father in relation to it.
James Carlson.
Thank you. Yeah, we have evidence that there was taken seriously by the government. They did investigate it. They did identify the issue as an electromagnetic feedback problem. And then they claim they solved it, that particular issue. And now we know that radio transmissions aren't allowed in nuclear missile silos anymore because they can create these strange effects where sometimes the signal can bounce around and get all spun up and interfere with things. So they use infrasound transmissions so that there isn't an electromagnetic interference possibility anymore. So with all of those things in place, so if
that doesn't make any sense, because if he's talking about the site, the security police, and it wasn't just one or two, it was several of them that saw the site.
That we aren't making sense.
No, you're not. Fair. You're not making sense, because you think all this happened at the silo, and I'm telling you that it doesn't work.
All right, I don't like that. We're just gonna pause that there. I think that it's important in having these conversations that we approach them with the perspective that we're trying to engage in good faith. And I would be very happy to continue that, except for the fact that we don't have a mutual respect right now, and maybe we can return to it. But I don't think that was a good way to continue that.
I'll just say that the thing about the Malmstrom incident is that it's really two separate things, two separate stories that people kind of just like combine together and think it's the same thing. There is no doubt there was an Echo flight shutdown that shut down 10 or so whatever missiles. Like that's in the records. That's in the SAC base history records. And Salas initially thought he was part of that shutdown. Then he found out he wasn't actually working that time, and he wasn't at that place, and he had to revise his story, and he revised it that he was at November flight instead of Echo flight, and then it became Oscar flight. And so there's the shutdown we know happened, and then there's Robert Salas's claimed event that allegedly had happened 2 weeks later because he had to change the date because he found out he wasn't part of the Echo flight, which is what all the records are from. All the records are from Echo flight that didn't have anything to do with Salas. Salas claims it happened a second time, like 2 weeks later at Oscar flight. And so it's a completely separate story. I don't think anybody's debating that something happened at Echo flight, whether that had anything to do with UFOs. If you look at Tim Hebert's site, you'll see that, again, he was a SAC missile commander at Malmstrom in the early 70s, that it was actually the security people used to joke about UFO sightings all the time. And he said, particularly in the 60s, that used to be an ongoing joke between the security personnel and whatnot on those SAC bases, that they would joke about UFOs flying around everywhere. And it was a joke. And again, and then to make Salas's case a UFO case, they bring up things like in Belt, Montana, 50 or however many miles that away, somebody saw a UFO that week, or that some other guy, distant saw a UFO, and they try and take the fact that somebody saw a UFO nearby with some shutdown. That must mean the UFO had something to do with the shutdown. And there's just no evidence to tie those two things together. We know there was a shutdown. We don't know Salas had anything to do with the shutdown. And if they mentioned an Echo flight shutdown in the records, why wouldn't they mention Oscar that happened 2 weeks later? Why would they Oscar and not cover up?
So songs in the comments, and yeah, it was getting a little heated. I do think it's important to keep in mind we all want to discuss and talk about these subjects, but he is saying that it didn't happen at the silo. That's sort of what the point he seems to keep harping on, is that basically the geography here is incorrect. Like what's being discussed around the geography is wrong.
I'd be I didn't ban him. He's saying,
oh yeah, he's not banned. He can jump back on the stream if it's going to be level. You're more than welcome to rejoin. Yeah,
please
I'll
do.
Just even reshare it. But yeah, you just got muted because
we can't be just accusing each other and not making
people
sense.
Not making sense or whatever. Like this is all good faith. And I think also too, and this is one of those things when me and my brother used to fight growing up, it used to piss me off. It kind of still does as an adult, but like let's also we should be able to agree to disagree on some stuff, right? Like this is not the cure for cancer. So let's bring Song back on. Dude, go ahead and let's just keep it even keeled for a while.
Yeah. If you guys boot me off and remove me when I'm trying to state actual facts and information, I'm not going to come back on. I'm trying to do some kind of disclosure and information. But if you guys want to run your little show in your bubble, you can do that. But I'm giving you real information about how some of this works without breaking my NDA. You can take that with a grain of salt, but I'm telling you the geography of how you're explaining it is not correct, because I've worked in the field and I understand how this works. And this is not skepticism. It's not UAP, tinfoil hat. This is just stuff that's even declassified. But unless you've worked in the field, researched and looked down missile alert facilities,
Right. We
silos and
understand
things
that
work,
you have enlisted
how you're
experience.
how you're explaining it is not correct on the geography and the locations and how this stuff works.
Let's
and this
get
is not
into it.
classified.
Yeah, so
That's
you're
what I'm
saying
trying
that
to
the
explain, but you kicked
silos
me
are.
off.
We
No, well,
we
go
understand, but we also do have other people waiting to get on the stream. So
No,
if there's
you did. You
a
said
summary
no. How you were
argument,
explaining it wasn't correct, and I was trying to correct you guys so it's accurate because you're researchers. So I'm
Well, let's
trying to
move
give you
into it.
real world
Yeah.
first person information about it, and you can even
Okay.
research it.
So
But it's hard to
Song,
find this info.
Please
so
explain.
we have other people waiting to get on the stream. We'd love to hear you basically summarize or provide some scaffolding here, and give
That's
you the
what I was
chance to
trying to do.
basically wrap up. So go ahead.
That's what I was trying to do if you don't kick me off while I'm explaining. So the thing is that these are closed intranet systems, if you'll listen without smirking or laughing at me, thinking I'm just trying to
Dude, you
argue. I'm
repeated
giving you,
yourself saying it's what you're trying to do 4 times.
but
Come
you
on,
told me,
please tell
but
me what's going on.
you were saying is that at the silos, at the missiles, it was shut down, and because of electromagnetism and the logic boards got fried and all that at Kilo, whatever, at this flight, and you're mixing this, you're fixing flights and you're mixing silo sites up. You're mixing math facility sites up. You're mixing them up on the names and classifications because a lot of people don't understand intricately how this works, and it's really confusing unless you haven't worked in the field. So let me explain. Let me explain. Is that they're missile alert facilities, and the audience gets it too. The missileer dudes, and Robert Salas was never physically there. Missileer guys don't go to silos because it's all segmented, called special compartment information, SCI. So security guys only know their thing. Red Horse engineers only know theirs. Missileers only know theirs, and we only go to specific locations to our duties, and nobody has a clue anybody else does unless the CO knows that's for the squadron commander. Now, with that known, he doesn't go to the silos, but he has abilities to know what goes on, and I can't discuss the methodology or the technology that they use there because that's classified still. But the thing is that there were multiple, not one or two, there were multiple witnesses. And the thing is, you have to understand, nobody lost their security clearance. Now, if they reported this kind of crap in the 50s, 60s, usually they would have gone straight to a shrink, straight to a doctor, and if they had no evidence, it was something high strangeness, anomaly, I guarantee they would have been kicked out. They would have lost their clearance. And this happens more than you even know. It's just not publicized. Now, with the weird Maelstrom incident, it's an intranet closed system. And please don't interrupt me about that. You can't shut off all those missiles from that UFO, from that location, which is just weird. It was brand new technology that was very advanced. These things did not start breaking, having maintenance issues till about 20, 30, 40 years later after they were installed. That's completely incorrect.
We've spent almost 20 minutes on this
So
discourse. Can you please provide a 30-second summary for the audience so we can move on to next joiners?
If you want to think about an answer to be skeptical, to prove your guy's point, and that's all you want for 30 seconds, it doesn't work that way, because most of the stuff you've been discussing in layman terms about how actually this works at missile alert facilities, the silos, how missileers work, security forces, the Red Horse engineers, you're not correct about any of it. And you're mixing up kilos and flights and Sierra and whiskey. It doesn't work that way because they have different numbers and classifications, and they alternate and they do change.
Sure. So resolve this down to a summary statement. That your point of contention is that you don't believe that accurate information is currently being discussed around the Maelstrom incident. Is that correct?
About half the information you're discussing when it comes to the specific details of how this stuff actually works, that's already declassified. Unless you've worked in the field, unless you've talked to actual missileers that are retired, you talk to Red Horse engineers and security forces that are retired, you're not going to get the correct
industries. I'm very well familiar with that. All right. Well, look, dude, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, what you were explaining about the silos and...
All right. So Yeah, that went about 5 times as long as it needed to.
Great.
Brevity is the soul of wit and the soul of good storytelling. So, all that said, let's get Talisma on the stream. I have them waiting backstage. Hey, what's going on? Welcome to Invisible Night School.
Hi, can you all hear me?
We can. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's a wonderful show, and I just really wanted to say, I think this is definitely one of the best episodes so far.
You're watching us go through our growing pains of having to contend with lively audience members.
Yeah, and that's good because that means that it's only bound to get better. My favorite episode is somewhere in the future.
Nice.
Thank you.
So Jeff, I know that you're I don't know if you know them, but I know that you're into John Hoops and Jason Colavito.
Yep.
And I was wondering if you could talk about like race and decolonization in the context of things like ufology, like out.
Oh, I am fucking here for this question. Come on, Jeff.
Like what? Just give your take on that.
I mean, I don't know so much about ufology, but particularly when you get into things like ancient aliens claims, when people try and bring ufology back to like the ancient days, and you start basically dismissing the accomplishments of indigenous peoples and groups and pretending like it either had to be some advanced lost civilization or aliens, or I think that's extremely problematic, and that comes up. And the thing is, there's a big mix between ufology and pseudo-archaeology and ancient aliens. Like this stuff overlaps like big time, and that's why you see people like Jason Colavito like talking about all these different kind of topics, and it's stuff that all interests me very. I have a lot of interest as well. There are some actually good papers. There's a guy named Ryan Cook that's an anthropologist that addresses the issue of race in ufology. I will try and post a link to that paper after the show.
Oh, great.
But yeah, it's the problem is people want mystery. They want something, truly remarkable and anomalous. And when sometimes, there's just explanations when it comes to things like pyramids, mounds. You don't need aliens. You don't need lost races or civilizations. You don't need any of that stuff. And I think it's wrong to even promote those kind of theories. I think you're disenfranchising, indigenous legacies, and that's not right. I just finished reading Colavito's Mound Builder book yesterday. I've actually listened to the audiobook like 3 or 4 times. I'm a big Colavito fan. I've got like everything he's ever published like on my shelf over there, including his tiny little like pamphlet booklets that he's put out on things like theosophy, and he has one called Pyramidiots about kind of idiotic theories about the pyramids.
He started out as a moderator on a forum of kind of like Fortean stuff, isn't that right? Like his backstory. Do we know this?
I saw somebody just mention that yesterday. That's the first I'd heard of that. I didn't know that.
I think that was me on the Discord, so I'm gonna have to fact check that. But I'm sure I saw that somewhere. But yeah, let's not repeat that then. Anyway, yeah, I really enjoy Colavito as well. He's a little snarky sometimes, but that's okay.
I love it. Yeah.
Okay, well, one follow-up question. Well, it's not really a follow-up question. It's actually a completely disconnected question. But yeah, we should hang out sometime. It's not really a question. Yeah, but,
she's basically local to me, so yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. West Coasters,
Portland, yeah.
It's an even split right now on the panel, 3 and 3.
Yeah.
We've got both coasts represented.
Nick is Midwest. I exist in the fucking K-hole. Just beam my thoughts out to the rest of you people.
Also, one other thing I wanted to say is that I'm going to be hosting a premiere of episode 4 of my podcast, which is called The Earth, tomorrow at 6 p.m. That episode, which I published last December, is an interview with Campbell about his experiences of seeing
Cool.
things.
Very
Thank
cool.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I'll
fantastic.
jump in on that and join everybody that wants to talk about it. It should be interesting. I really enjoyed that conversation because it goes deeply into what we're talking about today: observation versus interpretation, and how some observations can shape somebody's entire identity, and the same observation can have almost zero impact on somebody's worldview. So yeah, I think it should be fun.
Yeah, and the reason, part of the reason I'm premiering it as well is because I made like a kind of video accompaniment basically
Cool.
for it. So yeah, thank you.
Great, and that's 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern.
Yes, yeah,
Beautiful.
and that's on YouTube, and I will share
post
a
the
link.
link post the link in the YouTube chat so other viewers can check out your channel and check out the video premiere tomorrow night.
All right, thank you for letting me share that.
Of course. Thanks so much for dropping in.
See ya.
See ya.
Can I just answer 2 quick questions people asked in the
Please.
comments there? Red Panda Qual asked me who I could have dinner with from history. 3 people from UFO history I'd have dinner with. Probably Hynek, Richard Hall. He's there on Nightcap. Maybe Claude Pellier. I don't know if is he still alive?
Who is that? I'm not familiar with that name.
So like the movie Close Encounters, the French scientist. People
Oh, it's that
that everybody says is Jacques
not
Vallée.
Vallée,
Yeah.
It's Claude Pellier, and he was one of like the founders of I think like Gipan or
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, he was like one of the original researchers back in the day. He did a lot of work on statistical analysis of what times sightings happen, like when people actually see UFOs. He did some of that early work.
Interesting.
Yeah, he was a great scientist. And I will also just want to comment just something that I think it was, you guys blocked saying. Again, there's this idea that skeptics...
he was writing like the War and Peace diatribe about how we're just a bunch of debunking skeptics. And I was like, no, I hear you. We heard you the first time, dude.
I just want to point out there's this common theme that skeptics don't know the topic. Like people say there's no such thing as an informed skeptic. I'm sorry, that's utter nonsense. Like most of the skeptics I know have studied this topic far more in depth than the average ufologist has. Like the idea that skeptics like just haven't done the research is just flat wrong.
And like, let's be real, that response to this show just belies a complete lack of familiarity with the week over week tenor of this conversation. Like, this is not a deeply skeptical show. It tends to flex and change based on who we're talking to, what we're talking about, etc. And I certainly don't think any of us supposed to have conclusory evidence on any subjects involved. The idea that like intellectual discourse has to become a might makes right kind of battle of the wills is something that I personally will not cultivate or engage with, and I certainly will not cultivate a community or culture around this show in which sort of this argumentation is at the heart of it. Absolutely not.
Well,
I don't agree with a lot of people that I love. Like I disagree with people in the history group all the time. Like but we still get along. Like I'm not going to argue with Don Schmidt about Roswell. It doesn't mean I have to agree with him on Roswell.
Right.
Like, like we can get along and have discussions and not agree on things. Even on our own Discord, like disagree with things all the time. And that's completely fine.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too, just a word to the wise, there's also something to be said for being able to succinctly and coherently deliver a point. Like at a certain point, it's a 20-minute Shaggy Dog story, and we're all waiting for the punchline. But I'm not sure how many times we can hear the same 6 words repeated before we just kind of lose interest. So people are welcome to be discursive, but maybe endlessly repetitive is perhaps not the best path to take when it comes to discussing things with the inimitable faculty of the Invisible Night School.
Well, I had a genuine.
Tell me to shut up.
I did too. I was like, am I missing a thread here? Like, what's the punchline?
Is it that the missiles are so far away from each other that it couldn't have been the EMP thing? But I want to just say that I was citing the FOIA documents that the government reports did, and he was saying, "Oh, they don't go. That, nobody went to a mental institution because they reported it." It's like, no, they did report it,
Well,
and we have the documents of it.
Right.
Look, dude, I'm also like, as someone who has not actually been in the military, but has been part and parcel to a whole lot of security clearance and Q clearance style work. One of my exes had Q clearance. Like, I also don't suppose that an enlisted guy who did a couple rounds also is somehow privy to extraordinary amounts of classified information on this subject and just happens to be tripping upon our coming across our show and suddenly is going to avail just extraordinary amounts of unrealized knowledge. Like,
Well, and maybe he had that knowledge, but he wasn't conveying it effectively, unfortunately.
Well,
I honestly, I didn't see what it had to do with geography or that. Really, the issue we were talking about was the technicalities between the shutdown.
Yeah.
I think the issue was more the timeline with the shutdown we know happened and that there's records for, and then the Solace event that allegedly happened again weeks later that we have no evidence for. It wasn't really a question of geography. It's whether Solace is even talking about the same thing or not.
Well, what we can prove about that, as you've pointed out several times, Jeff, is that we know for a fact that Salas has on the record changed his account 3 times now.
Yes.
So that's what we do know. And it doesn't mean that nothing happened, but it means that we have to really look at that carefully.
Because we know Solace was not working during the Echo flight shutdown. It was 2 weeks later, and and like I said, the things get mixed together. People think there was a Malmstrom case. Like, no, there was the shutdown, and then there was the Solace case, and you need to be clear what you're talking about. And because people talk about Solace, and then you talk about all the documents aren't for the Solace case. The documents are for Echo flight that happened 2 weeks earlier. And it's a timeline issue, not a geography thing.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well.
All right. Well,
like I said, go read Tim Hibbert's website about Maelstrom. It's everything you ever need.
Go read Jim Hibbert's website.
Tim.
Parting words from Mr. Jeff Knox. So it is just about that time. We're almost at the top of the hour. Let's do a quick roundtable. Campbell, what's going on?
Oh, nothing on the UFO front. Just stuff around here. So I won't go into it.
Right on.
What about you, Louise? What do you got going on?
Same as you.
All right. Let's keep this party going, Nick.
I'm not doing anything right now.
The most interesting show in the business right here.
Yeah, this guy's like, they think they know everything. They're constantly working on this. We're like, I don't know anything. I'm doing nothing.
After the vehicle interference, I'm looking for another avenue to go down because that one was fun. But
yeah, that was good. That was awesome.
I need another direction. I haven't found it yet. So I'm just waiting until something strikes my fancy.
What about you, Jeff?
Doing the same thing I do every day, basically. I spend about 8 to 10 hours going through stuff to put together the history post I do 7 days a week. However sad that may be, but I'm basically doing this stuff full time, so that takes up all my time from when I go to bed at night to when I wake up in the morning. So.
I greatly appreciate your daily posts. I save archives of them myself with Threadreader, so keep doing it, please.
Yep.
Yeah, Jeff, delighted to have you on, especially on such short notice. So looking down the barrel at the next few weeks, next week, the 25th, we are joined by the illustrious Mick West. Pretty excited to talk about the congressional report that came out. I'm looking forward to asking you questions about psychedelics and metaphysics. It'll be a great conversation. The week after, we have Sarah Scholes, author of They Are Already Here. She's a UFO reporter and writer. And then on the 8th, we're joined by Tom Orchowski. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but he is the artist and creator of Estimate of the Situation, which is a comic, actually. He was kind enough to pass one my way, special edition with hey, look, man.
Awesome. Yeah.
This is like, I get tribute. I'm the cute one, man. I'm the one who gets swag. So we have him joining. And then, we have some other great people just coming down the pike into the spring. Marco Visconti, who writes on occultism, magic, and esoteric traditions. We'll have Jeff from Strange Recon. And then we'll also be joined by Jay, who runs Paracon to talk about cryptids, high strangeness, etc. So we're pretty much, I guess we have a real show. We're like booked out for like 8 weeks. It's very cool. It's crazy. So crazy.
Not bad for a bunch of
Really
known
exciting. That's
Yeah.
a great list of guests. Everybody should read Sarah Skoll's book. They are already here. That's a phenomenal book. And
Yeah, she also
everybody should read
represents
Mick West's book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole. I bought
One sec.
dozens of that.
I also feel like we're definitely making it too, because we're increasingly getting people that are big mad about things we say. It's not just a lovely, super supportive group anymore. It's now people that take contention with some of the opinions voiced. So as far as I'm concerned, we're fostering conversation. We're always aiming to elevate the conversation, good faith dialogue. None of us are coming from any particular conclusory positions. We all just want to learn, talk, discuss together. So on that note, I think I'm ready to say goodnight to all of you guys.
It is bedtime.
It is bedtime. All right. Good night, gentlemen. I will see you next week.
Good night.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.